She stood beside me at the wedding and never said a word. Her hands folded like she was holding something fragile. At dawn, when the frost still clung to the grass, I understood why her silence had been so heavy. The wedding took place at the edge of a small town where everyone knew each other's names but not their truths. I was the groom's older sister, watching from the front row, sensing something unsettled in the quiet way my new sister-in-law moved through the day. The celebration was gentle, restrained, almost solemn, like a gathering that knew joy but was careful not to disturb something sleeping beneath it. The church smelled like old wood and flowers cut too early. Morning light slipped through the stained glass in narrow bands, settling on the aisle like it had somewhere else to be. Everyone stood when the music began. Everyone except her voice. She walked slowly, careful with each step, as if the floor might remember her weight later. Her dress brushed the pews. Almost apologetic. I watched her hands more than her face. They were folded together, tight enough to keep something from falling. From the moment the ceremony began, her silence pressed into the room. Not the kind that comes from nerves. Not the kind that trembles. This silence was steady. Ozen. Pastor spoke. Her father cleared his throat. Someone sniffed in the second row. But she didn't say a word. She smiled when she was meant to. Nodded when spoken to. Polite lift of the chin. A small curve of the mouth. People leaned toward each other in the pews. I could hear it. The soft explanations whispered like excuses. She's just overwhelmed. She's shy, you know. Some women are like that. None of it fit. Not to me. I'd been watching her all morning. How she paused before sitting. How she looked at the windows longer than the people. How she breathed like she was waiting for a sound only she could hear. I was the groom's sister. Older. The one who noticed things people preferred to skip over. I'd helped with the flowers. Fixed her veil when it slipped. She'd thanked me with her eyes, not her mouth. When she reached the front, she stood beside my brother and didn't look at him right away. She looked past him, toward the back doors, as if someone might still come in. The pastor asked the first question, the kind everyone expects an answer to. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Pause stretched, long enough to make the air uncomfortable. Then my brother spoke for both of them, smiling, trying to keep things moving. She let him. The ceremony continued like that, words flowing around her instead of from her. She became something the language worked around, like a stone in a stream. I watched her face for cracks, for tears, for fear. There were none, only that weight, heavy, settled. When our eyes met, it felt like walking into a closed room. Her gaze didn't ask for help, didn't explain, simply held, as if she was saying not yet. Even during the vows when everything is supposed to open, she stayed still. My brother spoke his promises clearly. His voice shook once. She listened like she was memorizing the sound. When it was her turn, the pastor waited. She didn't rush, didn't fidget. She nodded once. Small movement. Enough. The pastor filled in the rest. The way people do when they think they're helping. I felt something settle in my chest then. Not fear. Recognition. This was not a woman without words. This was a woman holding them back. The rings were exchanged. Her fingers were cold when my brother slid the band on. I noticed because he noticed. He rubbed her hand gently, instinctively. She smiled at him. A real smile this time. Brief. Almost painful. When the pastor pronounced them married, the room exhaled. Relief rippled through the pews. The kind people feel when things go according to plan. She leaned in for the kiss. Careful. Applause filled the church. Too loud. Too fast. As they turned to walk back down the aisle, she hesitated. Just for a second. Her eyes flicked toward the side door near the altar. The one that led outside. I don't know why I noticed. But I did. At the reception, people tried again. To draw her out. To give her a voice they could understand. She accepted congratulations with gentle nods. She laughed silently, shoulders lifting, eyes warm. She touched arms. Squeezed hands. but still no words. Someone handed her a glass. She took a sip and set it down untouched after that. Someone asked how she felt. She smiled. That was all. I stood near the window, watching snow clouds gather even though it was supposed to be spring. She came to stand beside me. For a moment neither of us spoke. Felt right that way. You don't have to, I said quietly. Not asking anything. Just offering space. She turned to me then. Really turned. Her eyes were tired. Not from the day. From something older. She shook her head once. Low. Grateful. Later, when the music softened and the candles burned low, I noticed her coat was gone. Then her shoes. Then her place at the table. No one panicked. People assumed rest. Overwhelm. But I remembered the way she'd looked at the door. I stepped outside. Cold met my face. The sky was darkening early. She was nowhere near the cars. Nowhere near the porch. The silence she left behind felt unfinished. I went back in. Didn't tell anyone. That night, long after the celebration ended, I lay awake replaying the ceremony in my mind. Her hands. Her eyes. The way she held herself like someone keeping a promise. Not to my brother. To something else. I realized then that her silence had not been absence. It had been preparation. Whatever she was holding back, it wasn't meant for the wedding. It was meant for somewhere quieter. And I knew. When she finally spoke, it wouldn't be in a room full of witnesses. The candles were still burning when the room began to empty. Thin flames. And steady. Like they already knew they wouldn't last the night. Laughter faded the way it does when people realize they're tired of pretending joy is endless. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. Plates clinked. Someone hummed while stacking napkins, off-key and distracted. Outside, the wind had started up, moving through the trees with that dry, whispering sound that comes before cold settles in. She was there one moment. And then she wasn't. I noticed because her coat was still on the back of the chair. Dark wool. Neatly folded. The sleeves tucked in like arms resting. She hadn't taken it with her. And that felt important in a way I couldn't explain yet. People assumed she'd gone upstairs. Or stepped out for air. Someone said, "She needs a minute." Another nodded like that settled it. No one went looking. I did. Not right away. I waited for a sign I could point to. An open door, footsteps on the stairs. Something reasonable. There was nothing. Outside, the night had thickened. The porch light buzzed faintly, drawing moths into its small, desperate circle. Her shoes weren't by the door. The gravel drive was empty. The old maples at the edge of the yard bent and straightened, like they were keeping time with something I couldn't hear. I stood there longer than I meant to. Let the cold press into my palms. Let the quiet answer me the way it wanted. When I went back inside, the room felt rearranged. Not physically. Emotionally. Like something had been removed and everything else had shifted to fill the space it left behind. My brother was laughing with a cousin. His tie loosened. His face flushed with the kind of happiness that doesn't question itself. I watched him for a moment. Then I turned away. That night, I slept in my childhood room. The one with a window that sticks halfway open and the floorboard that creaks if you step too close to the dresser. Nothing had changed in it. That felt wrong too. I lay awake listening. The house made its usual sounds. Pipes settling, wood adjusting, the faint hum of electricity inside the walls. But beneath it all was the wind. Moving through bare branches. Scraping. Buzzing. Starting again. I replayed the day in pieces. Her hands at the altar. Her eyes when they met mine. The way she stood like she was holding something just under her ribs. I tried to tell myself she was overwhelmed. That silence sometimes needs rest. That morning would make sense of it all. But the night wouldn't let me. At some point I sat up in bed. The clock read 1:12. The numbers glowed too brightly. I turned it face down. I could still see her coat in my mind. The way it had been left behind. Not forgotten. It down. The wind picked up. A branch tapped against the side of the house. Once. Then stopped. I thought of promises. the spoken kind. And the other kind. The ones people make without witnesses. I must have drifted for a moment because the next thing I remember was the sound of the floorboard. The one near the hallway. Familiar creak. I held my breath. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No voices. Just the house settling back into itself, like it had changed its mind. I lay back down, heart steady but alert. The way it gets when you're not afraid, just attentive. Somewhere between midnight and morning, I understood something without words. The way you do when you stop trying to explain and start listening. The wedding hadn't closed anything. It had opened a door. She hadn't left to escape the night. She'd left to meet it. That thought stayed with me, heavy and calm. When the sky began to lighten, just a shade, barely noticeable, I sat up again. Dawn hadn't arrived yet, but it was thinking about it. The wind quieted. The trees went still. The town seemed to hold its breath. I dressed slowly, pulled on my coat, the one that smells faintly of cedar and thyme. As I reached the hallway, I paused outside my brother's door. Listen. He was sleeping, deeply. The kind of sleep earned by a day that felt complete. I didn't wake him. Outside, the air had sharpened. Frost had begun to form on the grass, thin and delicate, like a first layer of truth. The sky was pale, undecided. I stood at the edge of the yard and looked toward the road. Toward the old paths people stopped using once they learned new ones. I didn't know where she had gone yet. But I knew she hadn't gone far. The night had taken its time with us. It had thinned the noise, cleared the ground. And as the first light stretched itself across the fields, I felt it settle in my chest, quiet and certain. Whatever waited next hadn't come to disrupt the wedding. It had come to finish a sentence left unfinished. I stepped forward, the frost crunching softly beneath my shoes. The long night was ending, but the truth was just waking up. The sky hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. Not night, not morning. Just a thin, pale light stretched tight over the town. I saw her before she saw me. She was already walking, coatless, her breath visible in short bursts that disappeared as soon as they formed. The road toward the old cemetery cut through the fields like a memory people pretended not to have. Frost lay over everything. Grass, fences, the tops of mailboxes, soft and brittle at the same time. I stayed back. Far enough not to interrupt whatever had brought her there. Close enough to know I wasn't imagining this. Her steps were slow, steady. Not wandering. Purposeful. The frost cracked gently under her shoes. A sound so small it felt like it belonged to the earth, not to us. Somewhere a crow called once, then went quiet. The town behind us still slept, wrapped in yesterday's music and leftover cake and unopened gifts. She didn't look back. I followed the way you follow someone through grief. Careful, respectful, letting silence lead. The cemetery gate stood open as it always did. Rusted iron. Hinges that complained if you pushed too hard. She slipped through without touching it, like she knew how to pass without leaving a mark. The ground inside was uneven, worn down by years of feet that no longer came. Headstones leaned toward each other, sharing secrets. Frost traced their names in white, making even the oldest ones feel newly spoken. She moved through the rows without hesitation. That's when I knew. You don't walk like that unless you've been somewhere before. I stopped near a birch tree whose bark peeled in thin curls. From there I watched her kneel. Not collapse. Not hesitate. Kneel. Her knees pressed into the frozen ground as if she'd prepared herself for the cold long before this morning. She rested her hands on the stone, bare fingers against frost, and bowed her head. I didn't move closer. Didn't need to. The name on the stone wasn't visible from where I stood, but the shape of it stirred something familiar. A space in my chest I hadn't opened in years. I remembered coming here once. A long time ago. Standing where she was now, my shoes sinking into soft dirt instead of frozen ground. Remembered leaving before I was ready. She brushed frost away slowly, carefully, revealing letters the way you reveal a face beneath a blanket. She didn't cry. That was what undid me. She breathed. Measured. Her shoulders lifted, then fell. Once. The wind shifted, pulling at her hair. She didn't tuck it back. Let it fall forward like a curtain. I took one step closer, then stopped. This wasn't mine yet. Minutes passed. Or maybe it was seconds. Time thins out in places like this. She reached into her pocket and pulled something out. Folded paper. Worn soft at the edges. She smoothed it once against her thigh, then placed it at the base of the stone, weighing it down with a small pebble she must have brought with her. Prepared. That was the word that came to me again. Prepared to remember. Prepared to finish something. I shifted my weight. A branch snapped softly behind me. She didn't turn right away. When she did, her face was calm. Not startled. Not angry. Just aware. I wondered how long it would take, she said. Her voice was quieter than the frost. I stepped forward then, slow, hands visible like I needed permission to be there. I didn't mean to follow, I said. It was true. Not. She nodded, accepting the words without weighing them. I didn't want to be alone, she said. Just, undisturbed. I understood the difference. I stood beside her now, close enough to read the name on the stone. Close enough for the past to breathe. It was a name I knew. One I hadn't spoken aloud in years. I swallowed. You come here often, I said. Not a question. She looked back at the stone. Her fingers traced the carved letters like they were braille. When the ground lets me, she said. When the road isn't watched. That made me look at her differently. Not as a bride. Not as someone newly arrived. But as someone who had been carrying something for a long time. I didn't speak at the wedding, she said, not looking at me. Because it didn't belong to me. Waited. The promises, she added. They were already made. The frost began to melt where the sun finally touched the grass. Thin lines of water ran toward the stone, darkening the earth. I felt the truth settle before it fully formed. This was his, she said. This place. He nodded. Once. I didn't want to bring noise here, she said. Not vows. Not music. Not celebration. She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. The cold had reddened her skin, but she didn't seem to notice. I needed to come before the day caught up with me, she said. Before life pulled too hard. I looked around. The leaning stones, the quiet rows, the breath of morning spreading wider now. I hadn't been back, I admitted. Not since. She met my eyes then. I know. That was all. She picked up the pebble, folded the paper again, and slipped it back into her pocket, not leaving it behind, taking it with her like a promise still in motion. When we turned to leave, she paused once more, rested her palm on the stone. Thank you, she whispered. Not to me. We walked back the way we'd come, side by side. Our footsteps careful not to erase the frost too quickly. The gate, she stopped. This doesn't change what comes next, she said. It just makes room for it. He nodded. Behind us, the cemetery settled back into itself. Ahead, the town was waking. The path was still cold beneath our feet. But the sky had chosen its color. And whatever waited for us beyond the gate was already watching. The stone was colder than it looked. Morning light slid across its face without warming it, like a hand that never quite lands. I stood there listening to the town wake behind us, doors opening, engines turning over, a dog barking once and stopping. The cemetery held its breath. Even the birds seemed unsure. She stood close to the grave, close enough that her shadow touched the name. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Her stillness felt intentional, like she was aligning herself with something already decided. When she spoke, her voice didn't tremble. It arrived carefully, as if it had rehearsed this moment in silence for years. I promised I'd come alone, she said. Then softer. But I hoped you'd follow. He nodded. I didn't trust my voice yet. She rested her palm on the stone. Frost clung to her skin, melting slowly, leaving a darkened print that faded even as I watched. He didn't like crowds, she said. Said they blurred the edges of things. The wind moved through the birch leaves behind us. A dry whisper. Reminder. We grew up here, she continued. Different houses. Same fields. The town liked him when he was young. Before he asked questions. He paused. The silence didn't rush her. They called it ambition, she said. Then trouble. Then stubbornness. Funny how names change when you stop fitting. I remembered him as a boy with dirt under his nails and a habit of fixing what wasn't broken. I remembered how quickly people learned to look past him when he wouldn't bend. He left, she said. Not far. Just far enough to be forgotten. She turned then, finally meeting my eyes. There was no accusation there. Just truth, steady and unadorned. I didn't, she said. The air felt thinner. As if the morning had leaned in. She told me about nights spent walking the long way home so she could pass the edge of town where the road dipped and rose again. About letters folded too many times, edges worn soft. About standing at this stone after it was placed, when the dirt was still loose and the grief was still loud. He asked me to promise something, she said. Not forever. Just honesty. Waited. He said if I ever loved someone else, I had to tell him first. Loud. Here. She gestured to the ground. To the name. To the space between us. I didn't know how, she said. For a long time. The sun lifted higher. The frost retreated in thin lines, revealing damp earth beneath. The stone seemed darker now, less distant. When your brother asked me, she said, I came here first. That landed gently. Painful. Gentle. I told him, she said. Everything I hadn't said before. I told him I was moving forward, but I wasn't leaving. Her breath caught then. Just once. She steadied herself without looking away. The town thinks silence means forgetting, she said. It doesn't. It means listening. I felt something loosen in my chest. A knot I hadn't admitted was there. She reached into her pocket again, pulling out the folded paper. This time she opened it. I saw the handwriting, slanted, deliberate, familiar. She read without sound, lips shaping words meant for one person. Then she folded it again and pressed it to the stone. I didn't speak at the wedding, she said, because the goodbye wasn't finished. I thought of the altar, the vows spoken into open air, the applause that rushed to fill every pause. This was the pause, she said, as if she'd heard me think it. We stood together, the town's hum growing louder now. Life asserting itself without apology. Do you ever wonder, I asked, if love can survive like that? She considered it. The question didn't frighten her. Love doesn't disappear, she said. It rearranges. She brushed her hands together, knocking dirt from her palms. The sound was small, final. I love your brother, she said. In the present tense. I believed her. And I loved him, she added, nodding toward the stone. In a tense that doesn't have a name. We walked a few steps away, then stopped. She turned back once more. Didn't kneel this time. Just stood. Thank you for not filling the quiet, she said. You taught me how, I replied. The gate creaked as we passed through it. The sound carried, then settled. Behind us, the cemetery returned to its patient watch. Ahead, the road curved toward town. Toward the house with its leftover flowers and stacked chairs. Toward my brother, waking into a day he believed had already begun. She slipped her hand into her coat pocket, fingers closing around the folded paper. Not letting go. Not clinging. As we walked, I noticed how the frost had thinned to nothing. How the ground darkened and softened underfoot. How the sky had fully chosen morning. At the edge of the fields she slowed. Looked out across the land like she was measuring distance. Not in miles but in memory. This doesn't end anything, she said. It just makes room. For what? Asked. She smiled then. Not wide. Not small. Honest. For the rest of it. The town waited. So did the truth. And somewhere between the stone we left behind and the door we were walking toward, I understood. Some love is loud enough to celebrate. Some is quiet enough to last. The house came into view, pale in the growing light. I wondered what it would hold when we stepped inside. The sun reached the cemetery slowly. Not all at once. Just a thin line of warmth slipping over the tops of the headstones, like it was careful not to wake anyone too abruptly. When it touched her shoulders, I saw the change. Almost imperceptible. Her back eased. Her breath lengthened. The tension she'd been carrying, quiet, disciplined, finally loosened its grip. She stood and brushed the frost from her knees with both hands. The sound was soft like cloth against memory. She didn't rush it. Let the cold fall away at its own pace. "Thank you," she said. Not loudly. Not formally. For following without interrupting. He nodded. Some moments don't need replies. We walked back through the cemetery together, slower than before. The stones looked different now. Less severe, more settled. Names catching the light. Shadows shortening. The morning birds had found their voices again. At the gate she paused once more. Not to look back. Just to breathe. Then we left. The road toward the house felt longer in daylight. Familiar things reappeared. Fences, fields, the curve of the path where children used to cut through in summer. The frost was already lifting, turning the ground darker, softer, ready. When the house came into view, it surprised me how ordinary it looked. Same porch, same windows, same quiet certainty. But something had shifted. Inside, the air still smelled like the night before. Melted candle wax, cold coffee. The faint sweetness of cake left uncovered too long. Wedding decorations lingered everywhere. Streamers drooping slightly. Flowers beginning to bow their heads. Chairs stacked neatly, like they were waiting for instructions that would never come. In the early light, none of it looked celebratory. It looked honest, like a pause someone had decorated out of habit. She took off her shoes at the door, set them side by side. I noticed she didn't look tired. Lighter maybe. Not happy. Just settled. My brother was still asleep. I felt relief at that. And something else. Responsibility. In the kitchen, the floor creaked under our weight. It always had. As if it remembered every footstep it had ever held. She stood by the window while I poured water into the kettle. The click of the switch sounded too loud. Neither of us spoke right away. Outside, the yard was waking. Frost retreating from the grass. A sparrow hopping along the fence line, undecided. She reached out and straightened one of the table cards left from the night before. The names printed neatly. Some smudged from spilled drinks. She didn't fix them all. Just the one closest to her. "They look different now," she said. "The decorations." "Yes." She nodded. "Last night they felt like a performance," she said. "This morning they feel like acknowledgement." I understood that. She picked up a ribbon that had fallen to the floor. Ran it through her fingers once. Then set it down instead of tying it back. "I wasn't silent because I didn't know what to say," she said quietly. "I was silent because I knew exactly what not to." I leaned against the counter. Let the kettle heat without watching it. "People think silence is distance," she said. "But sometimes it's a bridge." She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't need to. I thought of my brother. His open face. His certainty. The way he'd spoken his vows without hesitation. "Are you afraid?" "Yes." She considered the question not as a threat, but as something worth answering honestly. "No," she said. "I was afraid before. When everything was unspoken." She turned then. Met my eyes fully. "Now I know where the truth sits," she said. "It's not in the way. But it's not hidden either." The kettle began to hum. Low sound. Building. "I can live with that," she said. I poured the water into 2 mugs. The steam rose between us, blurring edges. She wrapped her hands around the cup like she needed the warmth for more than her fingers. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. We both looked toward the sound. My brother's footsteps followed, sleepy, unguarded. He appeared in the doorway a moment later, hair rumpled, eyes still finding the day. He smiled when he saw her. Not with relief. With recognition. "Morning," he said. Morning, she replied. Just one word. Clear. Present. He didn't ask where she'd been. Not then. Maybe not ever. He stepped closer, kissed her temple, and went to pour himself coffee like the world was still intact. And it was different, but intact. Later, after the house had filled with the soft noise of waking, water running, drawers opening, the radio murmuring from another room, I stepped outside. The sun was fully up now, bright enough to erase the last of the frost. The yard looked ordinary again, honest dirt, green trying to return. She joined me on the porch. I don't regret the quiet, she said. I needed it to arrive where I am. He nodded. Do you think, she asked, that something good can grow from truth like that? The question wasn't anxious. It was careful. I looked out at the fields, at the places where frost had given way to soil. Yes, I said. But it won't look like what people expect. She smiled at that. That's all right, she said. Neither do we. We stood there together as the town stretched itself awake. Cars passing. A door slamming somewhere down the road. Life resuming, unbothered by how close it had come to something unfinished. Her silence hadn't been a wall, had been a crossing. And now that we were on the other side, the path ahead wasn't loud or certain or easy. But it was clear. Behind us, the house held its breath, then let it go. I watched the light move across the porch boards, the way it settled unafraid. Some stories end with celebration. Ours ended with mourning. And I knew whatever came next would grow slowly. Rooted. Real.